Hashtag the Silent Planet Ambassador Zethkar of the Valerian Empire stood before the massive holographic display, showing the current membership of the Galactic Council. Hundreds of species were represented, their delegates present either physically or through quantum projection. The Grand Chamber buzzed with the usual political chatter, trade negotiations, and territorial disputes. But one seat remained conspicuously empty. The human seat. Honored delegates, Zethkar announced, his four arms gesturing toward the vacant space. We must address the elephant in the room. He paused, realizing the irony of using a human expression. Earth has now missed its 47th consecutive council meeting. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The crystalline hierarchy's representative, a being of living diamond named Shard 9, chimed in with a sound like breaking glass. Perhaps they have forgotten their obligations to galactic society? The Aquatic Federation's delegate, floating in her environmental suit filled with methane-rich water, bubbled her response. Or perhaps they never cared to begin with. Humans always seem different. Zethkar nodded grimly. When humanity had first achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago, they had been welcomed into the galactic community with the usual protocols. A small ceremony, a modest celebration, and an invitation to join the council that governed interstellar affairs. Most new species jumped at the chance to be part of something greater than themselves. Humans had simply said, "Thank you," and disappeared. Not literally, of course. Human traders could be found throughout the galaxy, their cargo ships carrying exotic goods from Earth and its growing number of colonies. Human explorers pushed into uncharted sectors, always polite, but keeping to themselves. Human scientists published papers that advanced galactic understanding of physics and biology, but they rarely collaborated with other species. They attended exactly 0 council meetings. What do we actually know about current human activities? Asked General Thox of the warrior clans, his reptilian features twisted in confusion. My intelligence networks have concerning gaps when it comes to human space. The admission sent another wave of murmurs through the chamber. The warrior clans prided themselves on knowing everything that happened in their sector and beyond. If they had blind spots, it meant someone was actively working to create them. Counselor Brightwing of the Avian Republics ruffled her iridescent feathers nervously. My trade ministry reports that human cargo manifests have become increasingly vague over the past 50 years. They list manufactured goods and agricultural products without specifics. When pressed, human traders just smile and pay their fees. And they always pay in full, added the banking consortium's representative, a slug-like being whose species had turned financial services into an art form. Never a credit dispute, never a delayed payment. Almost suspiciously clean. Shard 9's crystalline form pulsed with different colors as she processed data streams. I have been reviewing long-range sensor data from the borders of human space. There are anomalies. The chamber fell silent. The crystalline hierarchy sensor networks were legendary throughout the galaxy. If they detected anomalies, everyone paid attention. What kind of anomalies? Zethkar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Gravity shadows where no celestial bodies should exist. Electromagnetic signatures that don't match any known technology. And, perhaps most concerning, areas of space that simply refuse to be scanned properly. As if something is actively interfering with our sensors. General Thox's claws extended involuntarily. How large are these anomalies? They appear to encircle the entirety of human space in a sphere roughly 30 light-years thick. The silence that followed was deafening. 30 light-years was not a small distance. It was larger than most species' entire territories. Brightwing was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. What could create interference on that scale? Zethkar pulled up a holographic map of known space. Human territory was clearly marked in blue, a modest cluster of perhaps 50 star systems near the galactic rim. Hardly impressive compared to the sprawling empires of other council races. But if Shard 9 was correct, there was a shell of something surrounding that space that dwarfed many galactic powers. Perhaps, suggested the banking consortium's representative slowly, we should have paid more attention to what the humans were doing while they ignored our meetings. The Aquatic Federation's delegate bubbled urgently. Could they be building some kind of defensive network? But against what threat? Or, General Thox said grimly, the question might be, Are we the threat they're defending against? Before anyone could respond to that unsettling thought, an aide rushed into the chamber. The young Valerian's face was pale as he whispered something to Zethkar that made the ambassador's 4 eyes widen in alarm. "Honored delegates," Zethkar announced, his voice shaking slightly. "I have just received word from our deep space monitoring stations. 3 human ships have just entered the system. They are requesting permission to address the council." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. After 2 centuries of silence, why were the humans suddenly interested in talking? "Grant them permission," Shard 9 chimed urgently. "We need answers." The main view screen activated, showing 3 sleek vessels approaching the space station. They were unlike any human ships the delegates had seen before. Where human vessels were typically functional and unremarkable, these ships seemed to flow like liquid metal, their hulls reflecting the starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. A transmission came through, the voice calm and distinctly human. "Galactic Council, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. We apologize for our long absence from council meetings. We've been rather busy preparing for what comes next." "What comes next?" Zethkar managed to ask. There was a pause that seemed to stretch for eternity. Then, Captain Chin's voice returned, carrying a weight that made every delegate in the chamber feel suddenly cold. "The harvest ships will arrive in 17 days. We thought you should know." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. None of them had any idea what harvest ships were, but something in the human captain's tone suggested they were about to find out, and that they probably wouldn't like it. As the 3 mysterious human ships settled into orbit around the council station, emergency sessions were called, military alerts were issued, and frantic communications flew across the galaxy. After 2 centuries of wondering what humanity was up to, the answer was apparently about to arrive. In 17 days. #The revelation, the emergency session had been running for 6 hours, and tempers were beginning to fray. Captain Sarah Chun sat calmly in the center of the council chamber, her dark eyes taking in the chaos around her with an expression that might have been amusement. The 3 human ships remained in orbit, their crews apparently content to wait while the galactic powers argued about what to do. "Harvest ships." General Thox slammed his clawed fist on his podium. "You speak in riddles, human. What are these harvest ships, and why should we believe they pose any threat to the galaxy?" Captain Chun leaned back in her chair, completely relaxed despite being surrounded by representatives of species that could field millions of warships. "General, have you ever wondered why so many promising civilizations suddenly go dark? The predecessors, the Veil Empire, the Unity Collective, all advanced, all powerful, all gone without a trace." Shard 9's crystalline form pulsed with alarm patterns. Those civilizations vanished millions of years ago. Ancient history has no bearing on current galactic affairs, doesn't it? Chen asked mildly. "Tell me, Counselor Shard 9, how long has your species been spacefaring?" 7 million years, came the proud response. "And in all that time, have you ever encountered the gardeners?" The name hit the chamber like a physical blow. Every delegate present knew the term from their species' oldest legends and myths. The gardeners were bogeymen, ancient stories told to frighten children. Beings who supposedly traveled between the stars, tending to life like a cosmic garden, and occasionally culling the overgrowth. Bright Wing's feathers stood on end. The gardeners are mythology. Ghost generitales. Are they? Chin reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device that projected a holographic star map. But this wasn't any map the council had seen before. It showed not just their local galaxy, but dozens of others connected by thin lines of energy. This is what the galaxy looks like when you can see in 11 dimensions instead of 3. The map was beautiful and terrifying. Streams of energy flowed between galaxies like blood through cosmic veins. And moving along those streams were vast shapes that seemed to dwarf entire star systems. The gardeners don't live in our reality, Chen continued. They exist in higher dimensional space, occasionally dipping down into our level when it's time to maintain the garden. They see new worlds with life, guide evolution along interesting paths, and when a species becomes too advanced, too aggressive, or too numerous. She gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on a familiar spiral galaxy. They harvest. The silence in the chamber was complete. Even a usual background hum of life support systems seemed muted. Ow! Zitkar whispered. How do you know this? Because they told us, Chen replied simply. 250 years ago, when humans first developed nuclear weapons, the gardeners paid us a visit. Not physically, of course. They spoke to our collective unconscious, our dreams, our deepest fears. They explained what we were, what role we played in their cosmic garden. She stood and walked to the center of the chamber, her presence somehow filling the enormous space. They told us that our galaxy was reaching the end of another growth cycle. Too many aggressive species, too many wars, too much chaos. Time for a pruning. And you believe them? General Fox demanded. We verified, Chen said coldly. 2 centuries of careful investigation, dimension-shifting experiments, and archaeological expeditions to dead civilizations. The evidence was overwhelming. Every 75,000 years, give or take, advanced galactic civilization gets reset. The gardeners arrive, collect what they consider the most interesting specimens, and sterilize the rest. The banking consortium's representative was frantically calculating. 75,000 years, the last great extinction event in the fossil record. When humanity barely existed and most current galactic civilizations were primitive microbes, Chen confirmed. We're overdue for another harvest. In fact, we should have been culled 20,000 years ago. The gardeners are running behind schedule. Brightwing found her voice first. Why are you telling us this? If you've known for centuries, why break your silence now? Chen smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, she looked truly human rather than like some perfect diplomatic automaton. Because we're not going quietly into the night. Because humanity looked at cosmic gardeners who treat entire civilizations like weeds and decided that was unacceptable. What have you done? Shard9 asked, though her harmonic pattern suggested she was afraid of the answer. Everything, Chen replied. We've spent 2 centuries preparing. Every human colony, every trading mission, every seemingly innocent scientific expedition was part of the preparation. We've been building, learning, advancing our technology in ways the gardeners didn't expect. She activated her device again, and the hologram shifted to show human space. But instead of the modest 50-system territory the Council knew about, the map revealed a staggering truth. Thousands of stars were marked with human settlements. Massive construction projects surrounded entire solar systems. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, were ships. Not hundreds of ships. Not thousands. Millions. We never attended your council meetings because we were busy. While you've been debating trade regulations and territorial disputes, we've been preparing for war against beings that exist partially outside reality itself. General Fox stared at the display in disbelief. This is impossible. Our sensors would have detected construction on this scale. Your sensors see what we want them to see, Chen replied matter-of-factly. Dimensional phase-shifting, quantum camouflage, reality anchors that hide entire star systems. We've had a long time to prepare, and we've been very thorough. The Aquatic Federation's delegate was bubbling frantically. But why tell us now? If you've been preparing in secret, why reveal yourselves? Chen's expression grew grim. Because the harvest ships arrive in 10 days, not 17. I lied about the timeline to see how you'd react. And because despite everything, despite 2 centuries of being ignored and dismissed, we're offering you a choice. What choice? Zethkar asked, though he suspected he already knew. Stand with us and fight for your right to exist as free beings, or run as far and as fast as you can, and hope the gardeners don't notice you among the weeds they're planning to burn. The chamber erupted in shouting, arguments, and desperate questions. But Chen simply stood in the center of it all, calm and patient, watching species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years come to terms with the fact that they were about to become extinct. Unless a species they'd ignored for 2 centuries could somehow fight beings that treated galaxies as gardens. Outside the station, long-range sensors that had been recalibrated with human assistance began detecting massive gravitational anomalies at the edge of the galaxy. Something enormous was moving through the void between stars, something that shouldn't exist according to every law of physics the Council thought they understood. The harvest ships were coming. Hashtag the fleet revealed Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance, watching through the main viewport as the greatest military force in galactic history prepared for battle. The ship was one of humanity's newest Titan-class dreadnoughts, a vessel so large that it dwarfed some space stations. Around him, extending in every direction, thousands of similar ships maintained perfect formation. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving the all-clear from Fleet Groups 7 through 12. The revelation protocols are complete." Torres nodded grimly. For 8 days since Captain Chin's announcement to the Galactic Council, humanity had been dropping the veils that had hidden their true capabilities. Across hundreds of star systems, phase shift generators have been shut down, quantum camouflage fields have been deactivated, and the galaxy was finally seeing what 2 centuries of human determination looked like. It was magnificent and terrifying. "Sir," his sensor operator announced, voice tight with awe, "the Council fleets are approaching the rally point. Should I put their commander through?" On screen, Torres commanded. The main display shifted to show Admiral Zethkar, looking significantly older than he had a week ago. Behind him, Torres could see the bridge of a Valerian command ship, cramped and utilitarian compared to the spacious human vessel. "Admiral Torres," Zethkar began, his 4 eyes showing barely controlled panic. "I must ask again, are you certain about these numbers? My tactical computers are claiming your fleet consists of over 40,000 capital ships." "That's just Battle Group Alpha," Torres replied calmly. "We have 7 battle groups of similar size positioned around the galaxy, plus the defense platforms, the mobile fortresses, the specialist vessels, and the reserves." Zethkar was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "By the void, what have you built?" "What we had to," Torres answered. "Admiral, what's the status of the other Council fleets?" The alien commander consulted his displays. "The crystalline hierarchy has committed their entire home defense fleet, 800 ships. The warrior clans managed to scramble 2,000 vessels, though many are old and outdated. The avian republics, 300 ships, mostly light cruisers. And the others?" Zethkar's expression became pained. "The Aquatic Federation has withdrawn to their home systems. The banking consortium claims neutrality. 17 species have already begun evacuation procedures to other galaxies. I'm afraid we're looking at perhaps 10,000 allied ships total." Torres absorbed this information without surprise. He'd expected many species to run when faced with the reality of the Gardeners. What surprised him was that any had chosen to stay and fight. "That's more than we hoped for," he said diplomatically. "Every ship matters." "Admiral Torres," came a new voice as Captain Chun appeared on a split screen, speaking from her diplomatic vessel near the Council station. "The long-range sensors are picking up distortions at the galactic edge. The harvest ships are beginning to manifest in our reality." Torres turned to his navigation officer. "How long until they reach inhabited systems?" "At current approach velocity, approximately 6 hours, sir." 6 hours. Torres had been preparing for this moment his entire adult life, and suddenly, it seemed like no time at all. "All fleets, execute Revelation Final," he commanded. Throughout human space, the last veils fell away. Hidden shipyards the size of moons became visible, their massive construction bays empty after centuries of constant production. Entire asteroid belts that had been converted into weapons platforms revealed themselves. And, in the deep space between stars, the most secret of humanity's preparations finally showed themselves. The fortress worlds, 50 planets, each one completely enclosed in layers of armor and weaponry, each one capable of moving under its own power. They had taken 150 years to build, required the complete conversion of entire solar systems, and represented the single largest construction project in galactic history. "Dear Cosmos," Zethkar breathed as his sensors registered the fortress worlds coming online. "You turned entire planets into battleships." "Mobile command centers," Torres corrected. "The actual battleships are much smaller." As if to emphasize his point, swarms of smaller craft began emerging from the fortress world's launch base. Not hundreds of ships, but hundreds of thousands. From his position on the Defiance, Torres could see the Council fleets struggling to process what they were witnessing. Some of their species have been spacefaring for millions of years, had built empires spanning thousands of worlds, had thought they understood the scale of galactic civilization. They had been thinking too small. Admiral, his communications officer, announced, "We're receiving priority transmissions from the forward sensor arrays. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was human, but strained with effort and fear. "Admiral Torres, this is Commander Park aboard the sensor ship Vigilant. Sir, we've got visual confirmation on the Harvest fleet." "On screen," Torres ordered. The main display shifted to show deep space at the galactic edge. At first, there seemed to be nothing but stars and cosmic dust. Then, the sensors adjusted to compensate for the dimensional distortions, and the truth became visible. They weren't ships, not in any sense that galactic civilization understood. They were geometric impossibilities, shapes that hurt to look at directly, because they existed in more dimensions than the human mind could process. Some appear to be crystalline structures the size of small moons, rotating through angles that didn't exist in normal space. Others resembled vast organic entities, all tentacles and eyes and surfaces that reflected impossible colors. And there were thousands of them, each one accompanied by smaller craft that still dwarfed any ship the Council races had ever built. "My God," someone whispered on the bridge. "How many?" Torres asked, his voice steady despite what he was seeing. "Sensors are having difficulty getting accurate counts due to the dimensional distortions," Commander Park reported. "Estimated minimum, 15,000 major vessels. But sir, they're not just ships. We're detecting massive space-time manipulations around them. They're bringing parts of their higher dimensional reality with them." Torres nodded. This matched the intelligence humanity had gathered over the past 2 centuries. The Garters didn't just exist in normal space. They brought their own version of physics with them. "Admiral Zethkar," Torres called out, "are you still monitoring this transmission?" "Yes," came the shaky reply. "Admiral Torres, I must be honest. Those vessels, they're beyond anything we've ever faced. Our weapons may not even function against targets that exist partially outside our reality." "They will," Torres assured him. "We've had time to prepare for that problem too." On cue, the human fleet began to change. Energy fields that had been invisible suddenly became apparent as they extended from every human ship. The very space around the fleet began to shimmer and distort. "Reality anchors," Torres explained. "They force anything in their area of effect to exist fully in our dimension. No matter how many dimensions these gardeners normally use in our operational zone, they're limited to the same 3 that we are." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the galaxy, space itself seemed to solidify as hundreds of thousands of reality anchors came online. The Gardeners' Harvest ships, still hours away from the main battle zone, suddenly became clearer and more solid as they were forced into normal space. "Incredible Zitkar breed. But, Admiral, even with your numbers and technology, this will be the largest battle in galactic history. Billions of beings may die." Torres was quiet for a moment, watching the tactical displays as both fleets continued their inexorable approach toward each other. "Admiral Zethkar, do you know what humanity learned from studying all those extinct civilizations? They all fought defensive wars. They tried to protect what they had, try to minimize casualties, try to be reasonable. And what will you do differently?" Torres smiled, and for the first time since taking command, he looked genuinely happy. "We're not fighting a defensive war, Admiral. We're not trying to minimize anything. We're going to hit them with absolutely everything we have, all at once, in ways they won't expect." "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, "all fleet groups report ready. The fortress worlds are in position. The Council fleets have integrated with our formation." Torres took a deep breath. Humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for the next 30 minutes. Time to find out if it had been enough. "All ships," he announced on the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Torres. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for the right of intelligent life to exist without cosmic gardeners deciding when to prune us. Today we tell the universe that we will not go gentle into that good night." The Harvest fleet was 2 hours away and closing fast. In deep space, reality itself was beginning to bend under the strain of 2 incompatible sets of physics meeting each other. The battle for galactic survival was about to begin. Hashtag the battle for everything. The first contact between the fleets happened 30 minutes ahead of schedule, when a Gardner scout ship decided to test the strange distortions in space-time it was detecting. The vessel, a kilometer-long crystalline structure that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, suddenly found itself yanked into normal reality by humanity's anchor fields. It lasted exactly 12 seconds. Target eliminated, reported the gunner aboard the HFY Retribution, a destroyer that had engaged the scout with weapons that shouldn't have worked against higher-dimensional beings. The anchor fields are holding. They can't phase shift out of our reality. Admiral Torres watched the tactical display as more Gardner scouts probed the edges of human space. Each one met the same fate, dragged into normal space, and destroyed by weapons designed specifically to kill beings that considered physics more of a suggestion than a law. Admiral, his communications officer called out, "We're receiving a transmission from the Harvest Fleet. It's strange. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge didn't come through the speakers. Instead, it spoke directly into the minds of everyone present, carrying with it impressions of vast age, cosmic purpose, and absolute authority. Young species, you have developed beyond your assigned parameters. This is not permitted. Asterisk Torres felt the pressure of that alien mind against his thoughts and pushed back with techniques humanity had developed specifically for this moment. This is Admiral Marcus Torres of the Human Defense Fleet. You are trespassing in our galaxy. Leave immediately or face the consequences. The response carried amusement that felt like ice water flowing through his veins. Consequences? Small creatures. We have tended this garden for eons beyond your comprehension. Your species has existed for mere moments. What consequences could you possibly present to beings such as us? Asterisk. Let me show you, Torres replied. He gave the signal, and humanity revealed the true scale of what they had built. Every human ship in a galaxy fired simultaneously. Not just the 40,000 vessels of Battle Group Alpha, or the 250,000 ships spread across 7 battle groups. Every ship humanity had built in 2 centuries of preparation, from massive dreadnoughts to tiny fighters, all focused their firepower on the approaching Harvest Fleet. The result was beautiful and terrible. Space itself seemed to catch fire as millions of energy beams, projectiles, and exotic weapon effects converged on the Gardner formation. The reality anchors held the enemy ships in normal space, making them vulnerable to destruction in ways they had never experienced. The first wave of Harvest ships simply ceased to exist. Impossible. Asterisk. The mental voice carried surprise for the first time, and Torres smiled grimly. You've been fighting primitives for so long you forgot what a prepared enemy looks like. But the Gardners adapted quickly. The remaining Harvest ships began to spread out, moving in patterns that defied conventional physics even while trapped in normal space. And they began to fight back. The return fire from the Harvest Fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Beams of pure entropy that aged everything they touched into cosmic dust. Gravitational weapons that turned space inside out. Energy discharges that seemed to burn through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Battle of the Galactic Edge had begun in earnest. Damage report, Torres called out as the Defiant shook under impacts that had no right to exist. Hull integrity at 85%, his engineering officer reported. That the dimensional shielding is holding but barely. Sir, their weapons are trying to exist in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Our shields are designed for 3-dimensional physics. Switch to Protocol 7, Torres ordered. Throughout the human fleet, ships that had been fighting like traditional spacecrafts suddenly began to move in ways that hurt to watch. Humanity had spent decades studying the wreckage of higher-dimensional technology, and they had learned to build ships that could fight fire with fire. Human vessels began phase-shifting through angles that didn't exist, appearing behind Gardner's ships and disappearing before return fire could connect. The Fortress worlds revealed weapons that fired through folded space, striking targets light years away instantly. And in the deepest parts of human space, ancient alien technology that humanity had reverse-engineered began to wake up. The battle was no longer taking place in normal space alone. It had become a conflict across multiple dimensions, with reality itself serving as the battlefield. Admiral Zethkar's voice crackled through the communications array, strained with disbelief. Admiral Torres, our sensors are reading impossible energy signatures. Are your ships actually firing through higher dimensions? Among other things, Torres replied, watching as a squad of human fighters simply stepped sideways through reality and appeared inside a harvest ship. We told you we've been preparing. The Council fleets were struggling to keep up with a battle that was happening on multiple planes of existence simultaneously. Their sensors could barely track ships that were phasing in and out of normal space, and their weapons were designed for three-dimensional targets. But they were trying. Valerian battlecruisers focused their fire on harvest ships that had been forced into normal space by human anchor fields. Crystalline hierarchy vessels used their advanced sensors to spot dimensional distortions and guide human weapons to their targets. The warrior clans threw themselves into the fight with savage joy, ramming damaged harvest ships with boarding craft full of warriors who somehow managed to fight beings made of living mathematics. The battle raged across light years of space, with entire star systems serving as maneuvering room for fleets that contained millions of ships. Solar flares erupted as exotic weapons discharged too close to stars. Planets were evacuated as stray shots from harvest ships carved continents into geometric impossibilities. And, slowly, incredibly, the gardeners began to lose. This is not possible. Your species lacks the development to challenge us. The mental voice now carried notes of something that might have been fear if beings that old were capable of such emotions. You're right, Torres admitted as he watched another wave of harvest ships succumb to concentrated human firepower. We lack the development to challenge you under normal circumstances. That's why we didn't develop normally. The truth was something the gardeners couldn't comprehend. Humanity hadn't just built weapons and ships during their 2 centuries of preparation. They had fundamentally altered themselves. Every human in the fleet had undergone genetic modifications that allowed them to perceive higher dimensions. Their neural implants let them process information in ways that violated several laws of psychology. Their bodies had been enhanced to survive in environments that existed partially outside normal space-time. They had made themselves into something new, something that could fight cosmic gardeners on equal terms. Admiral, his tactical officer called out, the Harvest Fleet is beginning to retreat to the galactic edge. Should we pursue? Torres considered the question. The human fleet had taken significant casualties, but nothing like the losses the gardeners had suffered. For the first time in cosmic history, a harvest had been turned back. But this was only the first wave. You have won this encounter, young species. But others will come. Greater powers than us exist in the deep void between galaxies. Your resistance has been noted. The mental voice was fading as the surviving harvest ships retreated into higher dimensions, preparing to leave the galaxy entirely. But the warning was clear. Let them come, Torres said quietly, knowing the Gardener remnants could still hear him. We'll be ready. As the immediate battle ended and damage reports began to flood in, Torres realized that humanity had won more than just a military victory. They had announced to the cosmos that intelligent life didn't have to accept extinction as the price of advancement. The galaxy would never be the same. But first, they had to survive what the Gardeners chose to send next. Because somewhere in the void between galaxies, ancient powers were stirring, powers that made the Gardeners look like small children playing at cosmic significance. The real war was just beginning. The new cosmic order 3 months after the Battle of the Galactic Edge. The emergency session of the Galactic Council looked very different than it had before humanity's revelation. The chamber had been expanded to accommodate new attendees, and the ancient protocols had been modified to account for species that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Admiral Torres stood where Captain Shun had once sat, but he was no longer entirely human in any sense the galaxy would have understood a year ago. The neural implants that allowed him to process higher dimensional information created a faint shimmer around his head, and his eyes occasionally reflected colors that didn't exist in normal space. Behind him, holographic displays showed the current state of galactic civilization. It was changing rapidly. The reconstruction efforts are proceeding ahead of schedule, Torres reported to the assembled delegates. The 17 star systems damaged during the battle have been stabilized, and We've begun sharing our dimensional engineering technology with allied species. Shard 9, whose crystalline form now included geometric patterns that shouldn't have been possible, chimed her response. Admiral Torres, our scientists still struggle to understand how your species developed these capabilities so quickly. The mathematics involved should have taken millennia to develop. Torres smiled, an expression that now carried hints of cosmic awareness that made some delegates uncomfortable. We had help. The predecessors, the Veil Empire, the Unity Collective, they didn't just disappear during previous harvests. Some of them left behind caches of knowledge, hidden in dimensions the gardeners couldn't reach. We spent 2 centuries finding those caches and learning from species that had also refused to accept extinction. The admission caused a stir among the delegates. The idea that ancient civilizations had prepared contingencies against the gardeners was both hopeful and terrifying. But the immediate concerns, Torres continued, relate to what the surviving gardeners told us. Greater powers exist beyond our galaxy, and they know about our resistance. We need to be ready for what comes next. General Thox, whose own modifications now included sensory organs that could perceive 11 dimensions, growled his agreement. My scouts report distortions at the edge of the local group. Something vast is moving between the galaxies, and it's heading in our direction. The main display shifted to show a map of nearby galaxies. Streams of energy connected them like a vast web, and along those streams, shadows moved with purpose and intelligence. The architects, Torres said quietly, beings so old and vast that they shaped the fundamental structure of reality itself. They created the cosmic web, designed the laws of physics, and established a framework within which life could exist. The gardeners were their servants, maintaining the living worlds according to specifications laid down before our universe was fully formed. Brightwing, whose feathers now included patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, spoke with a voice that carried harmonic frequencies only partially audible to baseline biology. If beings that powerful are coming, how can we possibly resist them? By changing the game entirely, Torres replied. He activated a new display, this one showing the galaxy as it existed now, after 3 months of human-guided development. The changes were staggering. Entire star systems had been converted into computational matrices that processed information in 12 dimensions. Planets had been transformed into living entities that could think and feel and make decisions. Ships that were indistinguishable from their crews traveled between stars that had been artificially enhanced to serve as anchor points for reality itself. We're not trying to fight the architects on their terms, Torres explained. We're changing reality so fundamentally that their old rules no longer apply. Zethkar, whose forearm form now included energy manipulation capabilities that would have been considered impossible just months ago, asked the question everyone was thinking. But what will we become? If we continue down this path, will we still be the species we once were? Torres was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of the question. Around him, the council chamber hummed with energies that existed in dimensions that had been empty just a year ago. Every being present had been changed by exposure to human technology, enhanced to survive in a reality that was becoming more complex with each passing day. No, he said finally, we won't be what we once were, but we'll be alive to become something new. The alternative is extinction, not just for our species, but for consciousness itself. The architects don't want intelligent life. They want perfectly ordered systems that follow their original designs. The communications array crackled to life, carrying a transmission from the deep space monitoring stations. The voice was human, but strained with awe and terror. Admiral Torres, this is Commander Park aboard the Vigilant. Sir, we've detected massive reality distortions at the edge of the local group. Something is rewriting the laws of physics as it approaches. Torres nodded grimly. How long until it arrives? Current estimates suggest 6 months, sir. But, Admiral, it's not a fleet. It's a single entity, and it's larger than our entire galaxy. Sensors indicate it exists in dimensions we can't even measure. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The garters had been vast and powerful, but they were still recognizable as ships and creatures. What was approaching was something else entirely. All species, all fleets, all available resources, Torres announced. Operation Transcendence is now authorized. We have 6 months to complete the transformation. As the council session ended and delegates rushed to contact their home governments, Torres remained in the chamber, staring at the displays showing the approaching architect. Humanity had won the first battle by becoming something new. Now, they would have to become something unprecedented. In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed beyond recognition. Species that had been separate for millions of years began merging their consciousness into collective entities that could think faster than light. Technology and biology became indistinguishable as ships grew like living things and planets developed nervous systems. The fundamental laws of physics were rewritten to favor consciousness over matter, complexity over order. When the architect finally arrived, it found not the ordered garden it expected, but a galaxy that had become a single, vast, intelligent entity. Trillions of beings thinking as one, reality itself serving as their body, the cosmic web becoming their nervous system. The conversation that followed lasted nanoseconds, and Ian simultaneously conducted in mathematics that described the birth and death of universes. In the end, the architect withdrew, not defeated but impressed. For the first time in cosmic history, a harvest had been prevented not through violence, but through evolution into something greater than what had come before. Humanity had never attended council meetings because they were busy preparing for this moment. They had skipped every session, ignored every protocol, and dismissed every tradition because they were building something that had never existed before. A galaxy that could think for itself. And in the depths of space, other architects took notice. The great experiment was working. Consciousness was finding ways to transcend the limitations that had been placed upon it. The cosmic garden was becoming something its original designers had never imagined. The age of passive species waiting for cosmic gardeners to determine their fate was over. The age of active participation in the fundamental structure of reality had begun. And somewhere in the space between galaxies, ancient beings that had thought themselves beyond surprise began to reconsider their understanding of what intelligence could become when it refused to accept limitations. The universe itself was awakening, and humanity had shown it how to dream.